President Obama is set to enact a number of new gun control regulations by executive order in the near future. And today we got a preview of what those regulations might look like in a speech that he gave. It was actually a press conference, and we're going to show you a bit of that very soon, including a part where he gets a bit emotional about some of the mass shootings we've had in this country over the past couple of years. But first, we want to give you some details of what might be included, or supposed to be included, in these gun control regulations. The federal government will issue guidance that will narrow who can sell guns without a federal license based on an evaluation of the circumstances surrounding individual gun sales. The idea is to reduce the number of for-profit dealers as opposed to collectors or people who only give or sell guns to family members or friends who avoid background checks. In addition, the FBI will hire more than 230 more people to help run background checks, an increase of more than 50% to the current staff. Lynch said that this was in part needed to keep up with rising demand. I love that they had less than a couple hundred people. We sell so many guns in this country. A couple hundred people will take care of all of it. No one will slip by that system. It's foolproof. In addition, the government will also require background checks for people who try to buy restricted firearms through a legal entity, such as a corporation or trust, which is currently, you don't have to have those background checks if you do it that way, but no one would abuse that either. The Department of Health and Human Services will finalize a rule regarding health record privacy laws to remove barriers to states providing mental health records to the background check system. Now, considering how often we've heard about, it's a mental health issue, it's mental health, don't worry about the guns, it's mental health, I can't imagine any Republican being against this. And in addition, finally, I guess the administration will enforce tighter rules for reporting guns that are lost or stolen on their way to the buyer to make it easier for law enforcement to track down missing firearms. And again, who could possibly be against that?
Except the NRA and all the gun manufacturers. Now, they've always been against all of these regulations for good reason, because they want to sell more guns. So if you have loopholes that allow people to sell guns on the internet without doing background checks, well, you'll sell more guns, yeah. Right? If you don't check, for example, there's this technology where the gun knows your fingerprints and then will work only with you, and it
scans it in real time.
Right, and you can program it. My understanding is for your wife or whoever else you want it for. But if an intruder comes in and grabs your gun, he can't use it against you. Who would be against that, as John keeps saying? Well, the NRA would, because you know what? They want bad guys to have a gun.
Yeah.
Because the more bad guys that have a gun, A, they've sold those weapons. Okay. B, it's going to scare the crap out of the good guys, theoretically, with guns. They're going to buy more guns. For them, it's a virtuous cycle. For us, it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
So they don't want any of these checks because they want to make more money. And yes, by God, they definitely want the bad guys to have more weapons because they make more money.
Yeah. And the NRA cares so much more about whether people think guns are safe or not than they do about whether guns are safe or not. And that's why I think they're also fighting against things like the automatic readers and things like that, or even ones that just detect that you're wearing a bracelet that's coded to it, which I don't think anyone could possibly be against. They don't want those sorts of technologies being worked on or deployed, and they even boycott stores that sell guns that have those because they don't want to put out there the idea that guns are unsafe, that they need to be regulated in some way. And they don't care if not having those technologies means that, as we saw right after Christmas and on New Year's, a bunch of people kill their family members by accident because they think they're robbers, or a kid picks up a gun, shoots the dad in the face. Who cares about that? They've got guns to sell. This is big business, baby.
One more thing about that in regards to the lost or stolen guns. Again, why? I mean, if your gun is lost or it's stolen, it makes sense to report it so that a bad guy doesn't use it, right? And if they do, that it doesn't get connected to you because you reported it as stolen, right? It wasn't me that used that gun. That makes sense, right? Again, the NRA is against that. Why? Because that is a loophole that we keep calling them generic bad guys, right? But let's get real. Drug gangs, mobsters, they buy guns en masse. And part of the way that they buy the guns is lost weapons, right? Internet sales.
Whoops.
Right. All those different things. And if you keep tracking those, well, it's harder for those guys who buy a lot of guns to keep buying those guns.
Yeah.
And the NRA doesn't want it to be hard on gangs to buy guns. They want all the gangs to have as many guns as possible, again, because of that cycle that we just talked about.
Yeah. And look, I want to get to the Obama stuff in just a second, but the difficulty that we've had in this country to even pass expanded background checks, it might boggle my mind more than anything else in the universe. The idea that they say it's mental health. We just need to stop people maybe with mental health issues from getting guns. Well, if a person is crazy and wants to shoot up a school or a mall or a theater or whatever, and he can go to a store and have a background check to buy a gun, or he can buy it from a private party or online and not have the background check, what do you think he's going to do? And so then all of your rhetoric about mental health is absolute bullshit, because all he's going to do is buy it through one of the easily accessible ways of not having a background check run. What possible reason could you want there not to be background checks there? It doesn't stop your ability to sell guns as a private party. It just delays it by a couple of days. And if it's that desperate that you need to buy or sell a gun, maybe you shouldn't buy or sell that gun, I think.
Well, that goes to what I actually think is the most important part of all these regulations, which is adding extra people to do the background checks. Because there was a very famous incident, the Charleston shooting, 9 people killed in the church by Dylan Roof, where it turns out if they had more people, they could have checked it in 3 days. They didn't have enough people. They couldn't finish the check in 3 days. And because of an insane law we have in America, that if you don't have time to finish the federal background check in 3 days, they give you the weapon anyway.
That's
okay.
Absolute insanity.
Yeah, and so Roof, he had a criminal background, would not have gotten the weapon under normal circumstances. But the NRA is desperate to have criminals have guns. So, hey, you couldn't make it in time. Great, sell to the criminals anyway. And all the mental health crying, John's right. Here are regulations saying, okay, well, if they have mental health problems, let's put that into have the states help us put that into the background checks.
Yeah.
Nope, we're against it. So stop lying.
Yeah.
So you're not in favor of doing anything about mental health. You're not in favor of bad guys not having guns. In fact, that's exactly why Wayne LaPierre said that very famous comment now. The only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, not a bad guy not having the gun.
Yeah.
That's
how
not an
about
accident
he
in
not have the
phrasing.
gun? Huh?
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So cut to next year, we start to heavily screen Syrian refugees, and that takes time. But if it takes more than 3 days, just let him in.
You know how long...
You would never do that. Why would you do that with a gun? Man, this guy, he's been to a lot of institutions, and there's crimes to look into, but I'm swamped. I just give it to him. He'll be fine.
That's great context. I'm really glad John brought that up, because it takes, in our current system, about 18 to 24 months, a year and a half to 2 years for refugees to make it into this country. Okay, we're going to check them for 2 years. But if you want a gun, 3 days, then you get it if we didn't have enough time. Plus, if you're on a terrorist watch list, you can get a gun. Sometimes mistakes are made. Wait a minute, you're telling me we're going to check for 2 years to make sure this family running away from ISIS can get into the country, right? 2 years. But why? Because we're worried about terrorism. But as soon as they make it into the country, if they're even on a terrorist watch list, they can buy a gun right away.
Yeah.
That's insane. When are you going to get it through your heads? The NRA wants the terrorists to have guns. They want the criminals to have guns. And please, even if you're a right-winger, are you really going to look at us in the face, if that's possible through a video, and tell us, no, the gun manufacturers, they don't want to make extra money. They're not interested in the extra profit. No, they're super good moral people. And if they could, they would prevent any of their guns going to any bad guys, because they do not want to make that extra money. They don't want those extra millions of dollars. Who do you think buys guns en masse? Yes, some of your yokel friends, okay, and then they go take over federal buildings. They're criminals of a different sort. But also mainly criminals.
Yeah, and people love to say, well, why you guys are so suspicious of government, and you haven't liked the government, the terrorism watch list in the past. So why are you so quick to trust the government just because they put someone on a list? I don't trust the government. I don't trust all the people that are on that list. But if by accident they put someone on there, I'm a little bit more okay with them not being able to buy a gun than perhaps not get on a plane, because you don't need to buy a gun. Anybody who accidentally gets put on there is going to be okay for a week or two without buying a gun.